Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brabber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have more NBA free agency news to talk about today. If you missed our live stream on Monday, we covered basically everything that happened on the first day of free agency, where always a ton of action goes down. But since then, we have had a number of more significant signings that we're going to talk about today. We're going to ask and answer some big picture questions about free agency, and the New York Knicks have now found their next head coach. So we're going to talk about that as well. But I want to start with the most surprising and the biggest free agency move that we have seen since that opening day, that being the Milwaukee Bucks waiving and stretching Damian Lillard. So they now stretch out his contract, which is $113 million that he is still owed, over 5 years to open up the cap space to sign Myles Turner away from their division rival for 4 years, $107 million. They've also been doing some work on the margins, adding Gary Harris, bringing back Taurean Prince on a 2-year deal, bringing back Kevin Porter Jr. But the big story here is waive and stretch Dame, sign Myles Turner. How do you feel about this for the Bucks?
I mean, this has to indicate that the Dame injury is like career altering, right?
It is. I mean, it's an Achilles tear, and he's going to be 35 when he comes back. Well, if you look at the historical precedent, that's exactly how old Kobe was when he literally went from first-team All-NBA to shot chucker on a terrible team, like insanely inefficient. John Wall, career ended with an Achilles tear in his early 30s. Chauncey Billups' career basically ended with an Achilles tear in his 30s. Like, it's the worst possible injury in basketball. An Achilles tear already is. To suffer it as a guard in your 30s, it would be miraculous if Dame got back to an all-star level after this, basically.
And that seems like it's what Milwaukee's anticipating. It's just disheartening, man. It's like this guy put his body on the line to go play for you in these playoffs and re-injured himself when, I don't know, man, it just feels like he's a broken toy that's getting discarded here by Milwaukee, and I just feel for the guy, man. I guess they're trying to keep Giannis around. I think they're screwed. I think Giannis's and Milwaukee's best course of action moving forward is if they just parted ways, send Giannis to a more competitive, actual championship caliber basketball team, and you go recoup some picks for the future and build on a new timeline. Like, I guess I'll applaud them for prioritizing, maximizing shooting around Giannis. That really seems to be the focal point of this team-building strategy. Bringing in that stretch five who can also theoretically protect the rim. I have slowly soured more and more on Myles Turner.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not going to get back into this. Yeah, I was wrong on that one, champ. We're just going to gloss over that.
Thanks,
Myles is an ideal fit alongside a guy like Giannis. He's way more mobile than Brook Lopez is at this point in his career. He is a legitimate stretch big who can do a little bit of damage in the mid-range too. And he's more mobile. That's really the big thing with this Bucks defense is just how bad they were comically in transition with their lineup. And then bringing guys in like Gary Harris, bringing back Prince and Trent Jr. I think it's smart anytime you can bring in that archetype alongside Giannis, but this team is still glaringly missing one more component, and that's another reliable on-ball creator and scorer and basically perimeter initiator. And so I just don't think the Bucks have enough firepower on either end of the floor, Carson. I think they're missing that kind of player offensively, and then they don't have enough two-way athleticism. You know, they've got a lot of shooting, but they don't have a lot of high-end caliber defense, athlete, rebounder kind of guys that you really need in a playoff environment. So I don't know. It feels like to me the Bucks are going to be a 40 to 50 win team next year, middling in the East, and they're doing everything in their power to keep Giannis around. To me, it just feels like they're delaying the inevitable, man.
Yeah, their fate has been sealed, unfortunately, and it's been a combination of bad front office moves and bad luck that has gotten them to this place where the Dame contract, they now just have to eat $113 million. Absolutely brutal. and the assets that they had to compromise to add him, some of the negative moves that they have made, if it's trading for a Kyle Kuzma, just failing to add quality role players, failing to address some of these needs, if it is athleticism, if it is finding a center option sooner. Like, there's just a number of reasons that this Bucks roster has deteriorated to a place where they can't save it and they can't reopen a window as a contender with Giannis, but they just refuse to accept that. And seemingly Giannis refuses to accept that. And these two just really want to stay married. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. Like, I really think both parties at this point would be benefited by mutually parting ways, especially Giannis. Because, like, the Bucks, yeah, they'd get a shit ton of assets for Giannis, but I understand them not ever wanting to part ways with a player of that caliber, a top 2 player in their franchise history. It's just for Giannis. Like, there are so many destinations where you would be so much better served, and there are spots that have the packages to put together that would entice the Bucks. And it's crazy to me that that still is not happening, but this is clearly another move to affirm their loyalty to Giannis and their desire to win now with him. There's a report from Chris Haynes that Giannis is upset that they waived Dame. I'm pretty skeptical of that. I think that this is clearly a move that is made to appease him and make him happy. And I do like the Myles Turner fit with Giannis. Like, if you think about Brook Lopez of a few years ago, when he could actually move just the slightest bit, and he was always a true drop big, but when he was not the absolute dinosaur that he is today, he was a really nice fit with Giannis. Like, really what you want from that 5 spot is a great stretch big and a high-level rim protector. That's what Brook Lopez was at his best. Myles Turner maybe isn't quite the rim protector that Brook Lopez of a few years ago was, where he was like an all-defense caliber rim protector, but that is Turner's defensive strength. And he's more mobile than Brook. I still prefer Turner as a true drop big. I don't like him playing up at the level. I think we saw him get torched a lot there in the NBA Finals by Shea, by J-Dub some. He definitely cannot switch. So it's not really that you're going to change your scheme. It's just, this is a guy who is at least capable of getting back in transition. This is a guy who can make some recovery plays defensively that Brook just cannot, because he literally might be the slowest player in the NBA. So he has the perimeter game with the pick and pop, with the shooting, both from the mid-range and the three-point line, to complement Giannis, which you like, but this team is just so far away. Like, outside of Giannis, they have zero reliable creation. They have no reliable ball handling. Literally, Kevin Porter Jr. is the next guy who you look at in that role.
Dude,
and
we're burying the lead, man. They dealt Pat Connaughton and 2 second-round picks for Vasile Micic, man. Come on.
And they dealt MLB legend Pat Connaughton. I don't know how you recover from that, but the backcourt here is just not even close. I do think the interesting wrinkle is going to be seeing basically a full year of point Giannis, because that's what we're going to get. Like, they really lack the ball handling around him to do anything else. And so it is going to be about maximizing shooting around him, and then just letting him attack with a runway downhill, having him run a ton of pick and roll. And I mentioned these numbers in the regular season. The Bucks were actually most effective when Giannis was on the floor without Dame, more effective than they were with those two on the floor together. They had a +9 net rating in the minutes with just Giannis out there, and that was mostly because their offense was so effective. So I do think there was always some clunkiness in terms of fit with those two. Both wanted to be on the ball. They never really maximized what could have been there. And so I can see Giannis individually still thriving in terms of his production and giving this team a respectable offensive floor. But in terms of any aspirations to win a playoff series, the talent is just not there.
Yeah, I mean, Giannis is going to be 31 years old, basically, midway through next season. That's going to be his 31-year-old season. You're just wasting another year of some of the most valuable years that you have left. Like, you never know with how intensive and how physical the NBA is, what could be around the corner, but it feels really costly anytime you're a top 3 player on the planet and you're not actually going to be competing for a championship. Yeah. That's the bottom line to me. And if you ask me where the Bucks sit in the East right now, they're next to Detroit. Behind Detroit is more specifically where I'd put them. I just believe in Detroit's surrounding rebound and defense and athleticism to carry them through more. Like, Giannis unequivocally is that caliber of player, and when you put this kind of shooting around him, like, the offensive ceiling is really high, but I like Detroit more as a team right now. And so when you're in those conversations, this isn't meant no way to be disrespectful to Detroit, but you look at the difference in their goals. What is Detroit's goal this upcoming year? To win a playoff series. The Bucks' goal is to win a title, and they're nowhere close. So that's basically where I come down on it. I wouldn't call it a toxic relationship because it doesn't feel that way between Milwaukee and Giannis, but it kind of is in a couple of ways. Like, Milwaukee has mistreated Giannis, and I don't mean it in the sense of they've paid him. It's their roster construction. They have not done right by Giannis in terms of the team building around him. And it's not just the Dame, because that's a lot of luck involved, and they got some bad luck. But the supplemental moves after that have just dug and dug and dug this hole, and it feels like the sunken cost fallacy, Carson. I don't know why they keep dumping. I understand why they keep dumping more resources. It's to keep Giannis around.
Right.
But, again, I don't see the championship window here. And when you're not competing for a title and you're a top 3 player on the planet and you're continuing to get older, cut your losses, man. I think it's better for both parties to move on. I want to see Giannis in a competitive basketball situation before we blink and the best years of his career are behind him. And the Bucks need to move on and build for the future. It is the hardest decision to make in sports for a star and for an organization, but I think it's the right one to make.
It absolutely is. The writing has been on the wall for a long time here. The regression had been incredibly obvious and significant of this Bucks team. And then the absolute nail in the coffin was the Dame injury. I mean, it's just devastating and there's no recovering from it. And I've seen some people who are like saying that it's unfair to criticize the amount of cap that is going to be dedicated to Myles Turner and Damian Lillard over the next 4 years, which is $50 million for only Myles Turner to actually play because they've waived Dame. And people say, oh, well, it's unfair to criticize them for that because they were going to be paying Dame $55 million a year for the next couple years to not play basketball this season anyways, and then probably be a significantly worse version of himself when he does come back in a year. And my point is, I'm not criticizing them specifically for this move. I'm saying their bed was already made. They were already fucked. Their goose was already cooked, and there's no saving that, at which point I would just say, let's punt, let's get the most that we can out of Giannis, and let's both move forward. Like, it is just absolutely brutal how much that Dame contract handcuffs them and how much of a failure the Dame trade truly was. A trade that I supported at the time, a trade that I thought opened up a different offensive ceiling for them. But to give up Drew Holiday, to give up an unprotected first and 2 more first swaps, which was their last remaining draft capital. Milwaukee Bucks still do not hold their own first-round draft pick through 2030, which is another hugely limiting factor in their ability to replenish. And for the results of that to be 0 50-win seasons, 0 playoff series wins, and now you eat $113 million over the next 5 years to be left with no real quality young players, no assets. Like, it's just a devastating position to be in. The stretch provision is kind of crazy here. This is something you really rarely see in the NBA. Luol Deng got hit with this. Like, it's a sign of a crazy outlier, bad contract. And I just don't think you can really underestimate how much it hurts you paying $23 million a year for nothing. That's like paying for Cam Johnson, but you're getting nothing. That's like paying for Trey Murphy, but you're getting nothing.
On Bobby Bonilla Day, ironically.
Is it really?
Yesterday was.
Wow, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Shout out Bobby Bonilla. Like, you don't see that often in the NBA, but that's the spot that the Bucks are in, and I understand them trying to salvage the situation by waiving Dame, but only within the framework of them still trying to win now. That's really the only way that this makes sense, and again, I just think that entire idea is misguided.
Final thing on this, another thing that adds another layer of dirt onto the Bucks' coffin, to me, is the Kyle Kuzma deal. The fact that has been such a disaster considering all that they gave up, right? Like, you give up a guy you used a first-round pick on. I'm not the biggest A.J. Johnson guy in the world. I didn't like the pick at the time. But you used a first-round pick on him. So you just gave a first-round pickup with Chris Middleton, who, again, we didn't see the Dame injury coming. We didn't know it would be that catastrophic. Boy, I'd love to have a guy like Chris Middleton still on my roster with another young asset. I mean, just considering how disastrous the Kuzma deal was. Let me ask you this, Carson, real quick. Do you see it from their side at all more, considering they don't have their draft capital? The fact that the Bucks do want to be competitive through 2030.
I do understand that, and that's why I continue to say, although I think it would be mutually beneficial, it's more so for Giannis. It's more Giannis not wanting to give up on this situation that's hard for me to wrap my head around, because the Bucks aren't incentivized to lose, and they could get a ton of draft capital and probably a really intriguing young player for Giannis, and that would be great for their future when they have such a hard ceiling with this core, but they wouldn't be reaping the benefits with their own picks. And like I said, Giannis is a top 2 player in their franchise history. I understand if he still wants to be with you and win, well, you're probably going to try to make the most out of that situation. It's just, if I'm Giannis and I'm looking at some of the candidates that are out there, like San Antonio, even a team that as currently constructed is not a contender, the upside there, the potential for them to improve in the following years, which is completely absent in Milwaukee, the opportunity to play with another top-tier superstar talent in Victor Wembanyama, to play for such a competent franchise, like there's so much more that I would be in on about that situation than I am with the Bucks. Like, this is just clearly an extremely loyal guy, and I credit him for that, and I respect that. But unfortunately, oftentimes players are viewed through the prism of team success, and that shouldn't be the case. Your individual level should be the most important thing, but you want to be in a position where you have an opportunity to contend every year when you're a player this great, and the Bucks are not the team that can put him in a position to do that at this point. Like, the Kuzma contract, it's too much, over $20 million a year. Bobby Portis making about $15 million a year, like even that is too much. And so now your entire cap is tied up in Giannis, Turner, Kuzma, Portis, and then paying Dame $23 million a year to not play. Outside of that, like, you're literally just fighting for scraps, and in no world is that core good enough to even put you in the top 4 in the East. Like, Atlanta is clearly a significantly better roster. The only path to Milwaukee winning a playoff series, which I think would be their absolute ceiling, and I think even that is pretty unlikely, is like an all-time Giannis series. And we got maybe an all-time Giannis series against the Pacers, and that's obviously a team that went to the NBA Finals. Very, very good basketball team, but Giannis was unbelievable. It was some of the best work of his playoff career, and they got absolutely obliterated in that series. And yeah, that was without Dame, but they don't have Dame. Dame is no longer a part of their future. So that's where, again, when I talk about what a failure the Dame trade ended up being, you understand that misfortune is a part of that. You understand, of course, that Giannis not being able to play in the playoffs last year, and Dame hardly being able to play in the playoffs this year, and just coming back. Like, all of that is unfortunate, but it's the reality all the same. And the reality is exactly that. It's very unfortunate for the Milwaukee Bucks. For Dame's future, it's interesting. You said that you feel bad for him, and I understand that, like, this can look kind of cold, but I have a feeling that Dame is going to view this as an opportunity, because the Bucks are in a fucked basketball situation. He gets paid the entirety of his contract and now only has an opportunity to go out there and make more money. And now he picks his destination. He can go wherever he wants. I don't think he ever wanted to be in Milwaukee. He wanted to be in Miami originally, was all the reporting.
I meant it more as he put his body on the line for this team. You know, he didn't have to rush to come back. I just meant more that, like, he sacrificed trying to rush back to play in these playoffs, and then it's just like, all right, peace, bruh.
Yeah, I do see that. I do think it's important to note there's no real reason to think that there's a correlation between him coming back from the blood clots and the Achilles tear. Now, obviously, there is the potential of just him having to tune back up into shape so rapidly. I don't want to speculate about any of that. I see where you're coming from. I would also say I think that there is an opportunity here for Dame, and that he's still going to get paid out everything that he's owed, and now he has an opportunity to go to a better basketball situation, make more money, and we'll see what he can do with that.
And his role is probably going to be different, but it's he's going to have an opportunity to win, certainly more so than he would in Milwaukee, which I really, Dame's one of those guys that's on my short list of, you know, you'd love to see him get a ring. You know, guys like Chris Paul, like, I'd love for Dame to go a winning spot and go hunt that ring, man.
And I am cautiously a little bit optimistic about his recovery. Now, again, this is the most devastating that a basketball injury can be, but just on the fact that he's a top 5 3-point shooter we've seen in the history of this game, like there is an ability for your game to age in spite of injury, in spite of a significant loss of explosiveness that does come with that. Is it going to be an all-star, all-NBA level? Again, that's highly unlikely. It would be really, really fortunate if he were able to return to that level, but he's always going to be able to find a spot, I think, if it's doing more off the catch, doing more off ball, if it's just, okay, giving you 25 minutes and being a spark, because even though he's not much of a threat to get downhill, he can still extend your defense 30 feet out with that insane range, and there's playmaking value that feeds off of that. So I'm hopeful that Dame is able to find a home and is able to still be productive in some role, and I think he probably will be. Just not going to be the same role, not going to be the same level that he's been at even this past year. For the Pacers, they lose Myles Turner outright. Obviously, things have changed for them because of the Achilles tear to their star point guard, and so they know that they're going to be without Hallie for this next season, but they just lose a very important part of their finals run. How do you feel about this for them?
Yeah, I mean, Indiana has precipitously dropped in this free agency period for me in the East just because, I mean, Halliburton's out. Center's like their weakest spot, too. If there was one spot they couldn't afford to lose anybody, it's definitely there. Like, I mean, we were getting Thomas Bryant minutes. We were getting Tony Bradley minutes in the playoffs. Like, if I'm them, I would probably be in scramble mode, trying to flip one of these wings or flip one of these backup guards or something like that, one of these younger players on my roster, and seeing if I could flip them for a playable big. Like, their best 5 option is like Obi Toppin small ball 5, and you're not running a full season with that. I mean, like, Indiana's going to be scrapping to be 500 next season with the loss of Turner, with Halliburton being out. Like, this team is just going to be trying to tread water. So it's not like this has any major bearing on their championship odds for next season or anything like that. Like, this team's not – that's not their goal. Their goalposts have changed for this team after the Halliburton injury. But I would be in scramble mode. I mean, it's undeniable that he was a great fit alongside a guy like Halliburton too, and he's still one of the most skilled big men in basketball, and we're talking about spacing the floor. So it's a rare archetype to find, man. That's why Myles Turner has been in these trade block conversations for a decade now. It's because he's such a good fit alongside so many different teams. Like, that ability to, you know, to be a solid rim protector and rebounder, but be a real floor spacer at the 5 spot.
He's not a solid rebounder, let's be honest. He's one of the worst rebounding centers in basketball.
I just mean he's a big dude, I guess. A big dude that can shoot like that. Like, it's a rare thing to find in that kind of archetype, and that's why he's been so valuable. So, I mean, this Indiana offense might take a hit. Like, it's hard to find a guy that can space the floor like that at the 5. So, I'd be willing to make a move if I'm Indiana, man. I'd be shopping, I don't know, a Ben Shepherd. I'd be shopping somebody down my roster, trying to figure out who I could find to fill in that spot.
So the rumor right now is that the Pacers have some interest in DeAndre Ayton, which would make sense for them as a stopgap, knowing that you're going to get him at a super discounted price. We know that they previously had interest in him. They tried to sign him outright back in 2022, and then the Suns just matched the offer and brought him back. I'm not a DeAndre Ayton guy. I think that Myles Turner is a significantly more effective starting center, but it's a value move.
I don't really think he'd gel with Indiana's locker room.
Why do you say that? You just think he's not enough of a dog?
Yeah, pretty much.
Listen, I can see that. My point is, DeAndre Ayton at $35 million is an entirely different proposition than DeAndre Ayton at $5 million. And, like, that's what we're going to be talking about if the Pacers take him on. It's going to be a super cheap deal because he's already been bought out. So I would like that for them. I still think the Pacers are absolutely hurt more by Myles Turner's departure than the Bucks are helped by his acquisition, all things considered, with them having to stretch and waive Dame and whatnot. Because even if you have some questions about, can Myles Turner, like, be the starting center that takes this team all the way, not just to the brink of an NBA title, but through an NBA Finals to a title. And I can understand some concerns about his schematic defensive versatility, maybe the rebounding issues. In the finals, you saw when that pick and pop game broke down and he just wasn't effective as a jump shooter, he didn't have the level of mismatch attacking you would have liked to see, and he really just faded away. He's not perfect, but he is quite good, and you want to keep the asset. Like 4 years, $107 million, you can shell that out, and you know that you're going to be able to move that contract down the line if you do want to, but it's painful to me for them to just let the talent walk. He wanted to come back, is the reporting, and clearly Indiana just wants to stay under the tax for this 1 year because they know they're not going to be super competitive. They know they're going to be like a play-in team without Hallie, which to me is just a bit short-sighted. Obviously, I'm not familiar with the exact particulars of their ownership and their finances, but I think that you are putting yourself at a disadvantaged position long-term by getting nothing out of the asset that is Myles Turner, just to prioritize cutting some costs in the short term. And even if they get Ayton, my feelings on that won't change. Like, that would be a decent stopgap short-term upgrade. But if your feeling is Myles Turner isn't our championship center, then I don't know why you would feel that DeAndre Ayton is your championship center. So I think that this is unfortunate for the Pacers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ayton's a little bit better than Myles Turner, a little more reliable.
You think Ayton's better than Turner? I don't think so.
It's comparable. I don't know. They're on the same level, bro.
I just think that Myles Turner's ability to be that complement out of the pick and roll game, I think the fact that he actually does at least bring you like that motor, and his rim protection was pretty good in the playoffs. I prefer his sort of play finishing archetype. I also think he's got some decent little connective passing field that has probably just come from playing in Indiana's system and playing with Hallie. He's improved there. Ayton, you obviously have significantly better rebounding value. You have his ability to be such a great like touch shot maker on hooks and floaters and whatnot. That's where he's really effective. But defensively, I think that he is inferior. I think that the scoring ceiling with him is not as high just because Turner does have that dimension of the jump shooting that is so lethal. I prefer Myles Turner. Ayton, I don't know what he's going to look like in a serious context again. If you could get 2021 playoffs Ayton, who was totally locked in and busting his ass on the glass and defensively, that's a different player, but haven't seen that guy in 4 years, so I'm not optimistic about him coming back.
I'm just really surprised that the Pacers have fought to keep Myles Turner for so long and they just let him walk. You know what? It's just surprising to me that he's one of the longest tenured players in the league. He's the longest tenured Pacer. He's persevered through every single mid-season trade rumor. He's the guy. Oh, Myles Turner's finally getting dealt this season, and then you go to the finals. And then you let him. It's just strange to me, man, that this is when they let him walk.
It is strange. I agree. And I think that it's really just cost-cutting measures. So we'll see what the Pacers end up doing. They have to do something to address center. They're not proceeding with Thomas Bryant or Obi Toppin at the 5. That's literally not viable. And this is clearly a major reset season for them. We were already disagreeing on how many games they're going to win. I think I set the line at 40 or something, and you were higher on it. That line has only moved down now because they currently don't have a starting center, and they got to figure that out. You know whose line keeps moving up, though, Logan? The Denver Nuggets obviously made a massive splash on day one of free agency, trading MPJ and a 2032 first for Cam Johnson, then bringing back Bruce Brown on the minimum. We've already talked about those deals, but their work continued yesterday. They trade Dario Saric for Jonas Valanciunas, and they signed Tim Hardaway Jr. for the minimum on a 1-year deal. How do you feel about the Nuggets continuing to build out this roster, and how much do you like what they're doing?
You build the statue of the Nuggets GM, man. This guy's making Calvin Booth look completely incompetent, bro.
It's two of them, bro. It's Ben Wallace. Ben Tenzer and John Wallace.
Shout out Ben Wallace, bro. Shout out the team of Ben Wallace, attorneys at law. Dude, the Nuggets have completely crushed this offseason. They have addressed basically every need that I had for Denver coming into this offseason. We already talked about the moves they made earlier, but specifically on our last free agency episode, specifically adding a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. People may look at Tim Hardaway Jr. and they go, oh, he's just a straight-up spot-up shooter. And yes, that's his archetype, but it's like Denver hasn't had a guy like that they can play. This has been one of the most low-volume three-point shooting teams in basketball. When they lost KCP, it was a huge blow to their spacing and their ability to spray threes, and just having a guy, like their best spacer that you could turn to not in the starting lineup was like Julian Strawther, right? No hate to Julian Strawther. I love him as much as the next guy, and he had one game in the playoffs, but it's like you can plug Hardaway Jr. in, and he's going to bring that kind of punch, and he's going to be a great complement to Nikola Jokic immediately. Flipping Saric for Valanciunas, masterstroke. Saric was basically unplayable, didn't get any kind of burn. Valanciunas is going to be the best backup big they've had in the Nikola Jokic era, and that's, I'm including, Plumlee was good. They had Hardenstein, but Hardenstein wasn't what he was going to become into.
Plumlee's like the only legit backup big they've ever had for Jokic, basically.
Yeah, and now Valanciunas is going to come in here, and he's still an elite rebounder. He's still slow, but that doesn't really matter. The guy's playable. You can turn to him and get a little bit of offense from him as well. He's an 81st percentile post-up scorer. He's an above-average roll man. Like, he's just competent. And that was the bar for Denver. That's how far they had fallen from their championship, was we need competent guys who can give us minutes. And the bench was just stretched so thin over the past couple of years. Like, I thought Russell Westbrook did a good job last year, but wasn't consistent. There were just so many holes that they had that were not filled. And Calvin Booth made this big mistake of trying to entrust these really young players to come in here and do it. And these GMs have come in here and made the right decisions. We're going to get veterans. We're going to get guys who can play right now and contribute to winning, because the young guys don't matter. Who cares about balancing timelines? I've got the best player in the world on my team. Let's push our chips into the middle of the table and make this team as competitive as possible. And that's exactly what Denver has done. I think that they've absolutely crushed this offseason, Carson. They have literally every box that I had for them coming into this offseason, they have checked, they have answered, they have found a guy to fill the role. I'm just giddy with excitement. October cannot come here fast enough so I can see this team play basketball.
I completely agree, man. Biggest priority for the offseason was get off of MPJ and ideally turn him into a better fit at forward who can do more of the things they need, just a more versatile basketball player on a significantly cheaper deal, and they did all those things, and they got a significantly better player in Cam Johnson in doing so. Then they bring back a sort of do-it-all winning role player in Bruce Brown, who I think will be more impactful and will look better in this situation than he has in less serious basketball situations over the last couple years. He thrives to me when he's in the right role, trying to do the little things to put a contender over the top like he did with Denver in 2023. And then another couple of major needs that we've been harping on with this team for a couple years, a legitimate backup big. And you can look at DaRon Holmes and say, okay, isn't that why you drafted him? Isn't he supposed to develop into that role? Hopefully, but you're not in a position right now, if you're Denver, where you should still be crossing your fingers and saying, oh, I hope that this young player develops into that. I hope that Peyton Watson becomes a more reliable offensive player. I hope that Julian Strawther becomes more consistent. Like, that's been your strategy, and it led to underwhelming results considering the all-time great level Jokic has been at for the last couple years. So it's great if DaRon Holmes does develop into a legitimate backup big. That's awesome for them. I also think they could still make that work because Holmes is kind of a 4-5 hybrid. I think he could play alongside an actual center, but you know who Jonas Valanciunas is. This is a guy who's been a starter in the league for a long time, probably a little bit too long, but as a backup big, I mean, just bruising, bullying mismatches out of the post, being a super efficient play finisher in the paint, being an elite rebounder. Like, you're going to get 12 to 15 quality minutes a game from him, having even a little bit of passing feel too. That is such a huge upgrade from just the ridiculous conundrum they've been in of, okay, are we going with DeAndre Jordan in our actual playoff rotation, or are we just going to go with a small ball 5 look, which is what they've done for the most part because you can't play DeAndre Jordan in the playoffs? Like, Jonas Valanciunas is legit.
Jokic can actually sit there and not have to sweat bullets thinking about how bad the dude is in his spot.
Well, and maybe Jokic also doesn't have to play 45, 46 minutes a game in every big-time playoff game for them. So that's big. Tim Hardaway Jr. is the exact sort of explosive bench shooter this team has needed, because three-point volume has been really the only limitation of this offense, which has such a high floor because of their ability to dominate the paint, because of Jokic's ability to operate at such a high level out of the post, because of the mid-range mastery of Jamal Murray, the cutting of Christian Braun and Aaron Gordon. Like, they can dominate inside the arc consistently, but there is a certain ceiling that comes from having more three-point volume that is valuable, and specifically in the playoffs, since the departure of KCP, moving to Christian Braun, who's a really good player, but is not that level of reliable volume three-point shooter, we saw teams so willing to load up so aggressively on Jokic, to pack the shit out of the paint, to double him, to just try to take away those passing lanes to cutters as effectively as they could, and Denver didn't have the shooting around him to make the most out of punishing defenses for doing that. I'm not saying that Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to be playing 25 minutes a game for them, certainly, but he is going to be, as you said, Logan, a guy who, instead of Julian Strawther, who you have major questions about, who's never really been in this spot before, you know that you can ask Tim Hardaway Jr. to give you 20 minutes in a big game. You know that in certain spots, if you really feel like we need to get the offense going right now, Christian Braun is really struggling, he's not trusting the outside shot, okay, we'll go with Tim Hardaway Jr. in one stretch, and he can bring that shooting spark. I just think it's a massive win on the minimum, too. On the minimum, like in a scaled down role, especially in the minutes he does play alongside just an offensive maestro in Jokic, like, I think that he is going to be effective in his minutes, and they needed an upgraded option in that bench shooter role. The bench is just such a massive priority for them in general, because you look at the last 4 years, Denver is a plus 11.4 net team with Jokic on the floor. That'd be the best team in the league, right? Every year, basically. When he sits, they're a negative 9.3 net team. That's basically the worst team in basketball. This is a trend that has continued year over year and really was just at a low point this past year. The backup big situation has been a joke. Now it's serious. They needed that bench shooter. Now they've got one. If there's one thing that you would look at and say, okay, maybe they could still add someone there, it is that legitimate bench ball handler. I'm not betting on Jalen Pickett to really step into that role. I think that Bruce Brown brings some of that, and we know that come playoffs, they're basically going to fully stagger the Jokic Murray minutes, so one of them is on the floor at all times. So in the playoffs, that role becomes a little bit less important, but you still would like to have somebody who can handle those ball handling responsibilities with the bench. But bottom line, these bench minutes are about to be way better. These bench minutes are about to be legitimately competitive and maybe offer some mix and match potential with the starting lineup. And adding legitimate NBA playoff team rotation caliber players for Denver is an accomplishment. Like, I think that's why you need to understand people are getting so excited about these moves and they don't seem like groundbreaking moves. It's because the bar has been so low. The bench has been so brutal. And now they've done it. They've added those legitimate players at positions of need. I just love it. I think that we talked the other day about the Denver and Houston arms race out west and which team posed the bigger threat to OKC. And I've been going back and forth on this a lot, and I was at the time. I was slightly leaning Houston. Now with these couple of additional moves, I think I slightly give the edge to Denver. I think that their offense is going to be ridiculous. I think that their starting five is going to be dominant. I truly love Cam Johnson upgrading MPJ, being more consistent, bringing a little bit more ball handling and playmaking and IQ, being a more solid defensive player. That group is going to dominate. And their starting five has been dominant over the years. It's been the bench minutes that have cost them. And in this past run, it was MPJ being so wildly unreliable. You upgrade in those areas, and I know what I'm getting out of Jokic, and I know what I'm getting out of this offense. And with a legit bench with Cam Johnson, I think they're great. I think that they're not just the second best team in the West on paper. I think they're the second best team in the league on paper. And they have a specific, really effective punch they can land against OKC that nobody else can in the same way, just with what they can do offensively if the shooting around Jokic is better. And frankly, if he is better, and they're obviously an incredibly difficult defensive matchup, but I do think that he can play better against them going forward. And I just think with more looks against them, we'll get more comfortable, as he did throughout their playoff series. And then they threw another great look at him with Caruso guarding him for basically a majority of his minutes in Game 7. But they've done phenomenal work. This is exactly what they needed to do to revamp and turn themselves into a bona fide title contender again, which is what they should be basically every single season of the Nikola Jokic era. And it's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see. Like, we're talking about where the Bucks are at, and I'll never forget how many people throughout this past year tried to compare the Bucks and the Nuggets and say, oh, they have the two best players in the world, but their rosters just aren't nearly good enough and they're both screwed. I always thought that was crazy. I always thought, well, the Nuggets are in a significantly better position right now, and they have way more maneuverability. They're much younger. They have so many more options forward to maintain and improve upon their position. And I think that you absolutely see that now, where they're right back in these conversations as a top-tier contender. And unfortunately, the Bucks, I just don't think have any path back. And I think the Nuggets still have their taxpayer MLE. So they don't have the full $14 million that they could have used before they made these couple of moves, but they have like $6 million. And with a Zeke Naji trade, if they could pull that off, I think they could free up the full MLE, which could add another quality or two quality basketball players, maybe that bench ball handler, maybe somebody who is more of a true four, or maybe if they did still want to go out there and pursue Al Horford, who gives them a versatile look from a big, maybe they could do that. I just think you have to be feeling great if you're a Denver fan. Like, every box that you want to check this offseason has been checked. Major props to Ben Tenzer and John Wallace. They've done a phenomenal job, and they've done what Calvin Booth simply could not and would not do.
Yeah, I mean, I was with Denver as the second best team in the league after their first round of moves, and I'm even more confident in their standing there now. The only thing that you didn't bring up, you touched on a lot of stuff. I just do like their versatility. You're talking about them maybe going out and getting another four or something like that. I just think that mix and match potential is nice, where you could run Peyton Watson at the four and you've got different looks that you could go to if it's a De'Ron Holmes, right? Where you can play. We talked about this throughout the playoffs if you guys were with us, but it's so important having, one, impactful role players that can play and can contribute, but also having versatility with your lineups where, okay, we've got a shooting look at this position. Okay, we've got an athletic defender, rebounder at this position. And the Nuggets have just been short on these guys for the past 5 years. Like, that's not an overstatement. Like, they have been one of the most complacent franchises in basketball in building around Jokic, and that's just not where you want to be. When you've got the best player in the world at your hands, you need to be aggressive. You need to go out there and continue to get better. And they've finally done it this offseason. I'm just ecstatic. I'm ecstatic for Jokic. I'm ecstatic for Denver fans. And I think it's going to be just so much more of a fun watch, man. You're not going to be sitting there on pins and needles every single game early in the second quarter going, damn, I hope we don't get slammed by 10 points in this run without Jokic out there or something. You know, like, you can have confidence that, okay, we're going to hold the lead. We're going to hold the line. Like, that's what every Nuggets game feels like. It feels like this freaking roller coaster where it's Jokic, 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 Jokic. Oh, shit. Here we go. Right back down. And then Jokic is going to bring us back up. And then we've got DeAndre Jordan minutes. And I feel like it's going to be a much steadier ride throughout this season with the bench unit. And to me, they're one of the big winners of the offseason so far.
And you make such a good point with that lineup versatility, because what was probably the biggest challenge for Denver in this playoff run? Obviously, the non-Jokic minutes always. But when it just came down to who is the fifth guy who we really trust, we know about our core four with Murray, Jokic, Gordon. Christian Brown had definitely some inconsistencies as a three-point shooter, but overall was a pretty productive, effective player. Then the question was, what the hell are we getting out of MPJ? Can we close with him? Is he locked in? Is he making his shots, which is really only where he brings his value? Or are we going with Russ, who had some stretches where he's doing some really good stuff with all the effort and he's making his shots, but also has the potential to basically put us in a position where we're playing 4-on-5 on offense because teams are fully roaming off of him and he can't knock down the shots to keep them honest. That was the predicament they were in every game. Now, not only do they upgrade to Cam Johnson, who I do think is going to be much more consistent and reliable, so they won't be facing that conundrum nearly as much, they do have more options. Like Tim Hardaway Jr. is a guy you can go to in a spot. Bruce Brown Jr., probably not to close a lot, but he's a good all-around basketball player, and these guys can just eat up more minutes at the least, where you had so many question marks throughout the entirety of this playoff run last year, and you still pushed OKC to 7. So I do absolutely love Houston, and I think both of them have interesting paths to beating OKC. For Denver, it's we are going to be the most impressive offense that you're going to face. And we have the best player in the world factor. And maybe we can get past you like that. And we can get crafty defensively and maybe give you some issues like they did this past year. Although I think the zone is something that gets less effective the more looks you give an offense at it. And then for Houston, their path is where the team that can be as nasty as you defensively, that can win the possession battle as convincingly as you can, that can bully you on the boards, and can we bring you down to our level offensively in a rock fight and we squeeze through like that? I think it's really interesting, and I think that both of them do pose significant threats in their own ways. Right now, I think Houston's ceiling is ridiculously high. There's just a couple more questions about what am I getting from a Mann? What am I getting from Şengün next year? I know what I'm getting from Denver. I know what I'm getting from Jokic. I know what I'm getting from Aaron Gordon. Jamal Murray will be a swing factor for them, but I'm just very, very confident in this core right now. We've got some news that is not free agency, but as we mentioned, Logan, the New York Knicks hire Mike Brown. Their long coaching search after firing Tibbs is over. They called every existing head coach in the league and remarkably couldn't get an interview with any of them. So they get Mike Brown, who was just fired this past year by the Kings. How do you like this move for them?
It's cool. I like Mike Brown a lot. I'm a really big Mike Brown guy. He used to coach the Kings. I think Mike Brown's a really good offensive coach. Two-time coach of the year, matter of fact, too. I don't know if that has more to do with his coaching prowess as much as it has to do with his circumstances in those years. But I really do like Mike Brown as a head coach and his ability to squeeze the most juice out of the offenses that he's put in charge of. If you've heard us talk about the Knicks, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. The Knicks have glaring roster construction issues that I think are going to be really hard to overcome in terms of them building a good team defense. That is still the core and most fundamental limitation of this team. The fact that Jalen Brunson is an abysmal point of attack defender that can be hunted defensively, and that Karl Anthony Towns is one of the worst defensive five men in the sport. That being said, if there is a guy that could get this team to run more deliberate actions, that can get this team to get the most out of their offense, because that's what I really felt most shortchanged by the Knicks experience this last season. I knew that they were going to have problems defending, and truth be told, I thought they did a really good job of getting the best wings that they could to be a good team defense. Going out and getting OG Anunoby. They may have overpaid for a guy like Mikal Bridges, but they got him. And that's still a pretty damn good defensive wing tandem. But I always felt like there wasn't enough nuance, there wasn't enough action, there wasn't enough detail to their offense. And they weren't getting the most out of what they could have, out of Brunson, out of Cat Together. And if there's a guy that's going to be able to come here and do that, it is Mike Brown. So basically, I think their offense has the potential to get a little bit better. I don't know what they do to get the defense better. I think that's just something that you're going to have to address through free agency or maneuvering. But the Knicks weren't really in a position to get a home run kind of head coach that was going to fix all of their issues. And so my favorite options were Mike Brown or Taylor Jenkins. I'm excited for Brown to get another opportunity. Hopefully he doesn't get scapegoated the way he did in Sacramento. I thought it was really dirty how the Kings booted him out of town. I thought Mike was the best coach that the Kings had had in a long time, and it really hurt my heart to see him leave Sacramento. So I'm really excited for him to get an opportunity in New York and a chance to go win some meaningful basketball games. So I don't know what it does for this team's long-term output when we're looking at the playoffs. Again, I still think they have things that are going to be hard to overcome defensively.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the Knicks are one of my top 4 teams out east still. even though that's shitty defensively, the East isn't that great. So I think they're going to be in the hunt. I think they're going to have a chance to maybe go back to the Eastern Conference Finals. But I like Mike Brown as a coach, and I think he has a chance to get the most out of this offense.
I like this too. You and I agree on the core limitations of this Knicks roster, and that's where I think, probably because they're the Knicks and they're such a huge brand, and people always want to have a scapegoat and they want to be able to talk themselves into, oh, we're just this one move away from winning the title next year. Everybody focused so much on coaching, and a lot of people did act as if Tibbs was the sole problem, and I had no problem with them firing Tibbs, and I do think that Mike Brown will be able to get a little bit more juice out of this offense. But the reality is, when you have two D-F level defenders in Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns as the two core building blocks of your team, you're going to struggle mightily. They had a 118 defensive rating throughout this season with those two on the floor. You're not going to win the title when you have those sort of major defensive issues at the roots of what you're building. I also think there is clearly roster stuff they need to figure out. The depth does need to improve. It would be nice if they could upgrade that fifth starter spot where Josh Hart was not as good as you would have hoped throughout this playoff run. Those are all roster issues that still need to be addressed, and that's where I want to be clear. This is not going to be some cure-all for New York, but I am excited, and I do think that this is an interesting move and a pretty good hire because the defensive limitations are personnel. They are just about the dudes you have on your roster. Offensively, the Knicks were very good. They were top 5 regular season offense, but in the playoffs, they were more middling. They finished 7th out of 16 playoff teams in offensive rating, and they were very, very reliant on the creation out of isolation and pick and roll of Jalen Brunson and the ability of Cat to basically either catch fire as a three-point shooter or do a lot of work attacking mismatches in isolation. Like, a huge part of their formula was those two guys have to explode, and they have to do it largely through self-creation. And Mike Brown is a guy who philosophically, coming from that Warriors coaching tree where he spent a long while as an assistant, loves his motion principles, loves his handoffs, loves his player and ball movement. And that's really how he revolutionized the Kings offense. And so I'm interested to see, can he get more out of Brunson off ball? Because Brunson has really turned into this super ball dominant, crazy high volume pick and roll and isolation player. And he's great at that, but he also has wrinkles to his game off ball. If you look at his time in Dallas, if you look at stretches of his time in New York where he can be super effective, he's got good feel there, he's a great shooter off the catch. That was not utilized basically whatsoever in this playoff run. So maybe Mike Brown can tap into a little bit more
the
there.
Knicks' offense, in my opinion, felt really aimless at times in the playoffs.
I don't know if aimless is the word I would use, because I think their direction was pretty clear. We're running everything through Brunson and Cat, but there wasn't creativity there. There wasn't much structure beyond that. I would agree on that front, and that's where I think Mike Brown can help. Maybe can he get a little bit more out of Cat as a passing hub for you, running handoffs, some stuff that he really didn't do at all in the playoffs. This is a guy who's a pretty gifted passing big. We've seen him average up close to 5 assists per game in certain seasons. He averaged 1.3 assists per game in these playoffs, and I think that Mike Brown maybe will utilize him a little bit more like that. And again, just more player movement, because at times the Knicks offense was stagnant. I see the value in wanting to get a guy like that, but he's not going to be the difference maker, basically, for this team. Also, I know a big criticism of Tibbs was his rigidity, right? Not moving off of Josh Hart, not going with Deuce McBride as a fifth starter, not making some of those rotation adjustments. And it is kind of funny because basically the biggest criticism of Mike Brown down the stretch of his tenure with the Kings, or one of the biggest ones, was just like him not playing Keon Ellis and him being too rigid there and him going with Kevin Huerter as the starter for too long. And like, I do think that you have to wonder maybe if there's a little bit of rigidity there as well, just in terms of rotation stuff. But I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good offensive coach, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do for the Knicks, who also made a couple free agency moves on the margins. They bring in Yabu on a 2-year, $12 million deal, and they're apparently going to sign Jordan Clarkson after he was bought out by the Jazz. Real quick, what do you think of those moves, Logan?
I like both of them. I mean, they're not game-changing moves by any means, but I like Yabu in his archetype. I mean, he had that big run in the Olympics where people were like, all right, maybe this guy deserves another shot in the league, and I thought he was pretty good for the Sixers last season. big body 4, can really rebound at a high level, high hustle, energy kind of guy. Is just going to leave it all out there on the court for you. Just heart and energy guy. And he's also a really good shooter last year, too. 38% from deep. And, I mean, that's the really big thing that you hope continues, is that's what makes him viable. Not only is he this really good rebounder and hustle and energy guy, it's that he can legitimately space the floor for you. So I like adding him, big Yabu guy. He's just gotten so much better since his last time in the league in 2019. He's a young man then. Now he's grown. He's ready to play winning basketball for you. And then Clarkson, I'm just excited to see in a winning role again. I don't know how good he's going to be, just because, I mean, he's steadily gotten worse and worse in Utah since his peak as like 6th man of the year caliber kind of guy every single year. But it is something that I think the Knicks could use. You were talking about it not having that kind of flexibility off the bench, not having that guy. It really was Deuce, and a lot of Deuce's game is predicated on that pull-up three-point shooting. Clarkson gives you another scorer you can turn to that's not like a guy that they've had. It's not like Shake Milton is coming off the bench for you and you're like, all right, Shake, you give me some buckets. It's Jordan Clarkson's a little bit of a step up from that archetype. So not groundbreaking, not anything, league changing, but I like both of the moves on the margins, and I think they're going to be better with them.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I like Yabu. I think he's a good player. I think theoretically he gives you another look at center, which you want because that's been so precarious for them when Mitch is out. If you're going with Precious Achiuwa or Huck Porty, they just really haven't had very good options there. I do prefer Yabu at the 4 just because he is undersized at the 5. But regardless, another big in the mix who is an upgrade in terms of depth, which they needed. And it's just important that the Knicks build out any sort of depth overall. Clarkson, if they get him on the minimum, I'm good with this. I'm not a Jordan Clarkson guy. I think that there are just some major issues there in terms of shot selection, his three-point shot and jumper overall being as erratic as it is, so the efficiency is generally very low. He's very trigger-happy, can be a very selfish player, but like you said, I mean, they've just been completely lacking talent in terms of bench guard scoring outside of Deuce. Is Jordan Clarkson a guy who's going to play much in the playoffs?
It was Shamet and DeLon Wright in the playoffs, man.
I mean, at the end of the day, I like the minutes those guys gave you once they actually did step up and play, probably more than what you're going to get out of Clarkson just because those guys were doing all the effort things and they were defending their asses off, and you're going to get none of that from Clarkson, so it's possible he is not a factor whatsoever, but if you're bringing him on the minimum, I think that the upside, even though it's not too high, is still justified there. The reality is these moves on the margins, they're something. The Mike Brown hiring is something, but the Knicks aren't going to really change my view of them without some pretty significant roster changes, and these are not them. So if you're holding them up against like the Cavs, I still view the Cavs as being basically in a different tier in the Eastern Conference. We've got another team that is trying to climb up out east that's made a couple moves. The Detroit Pistons signed Duncan Robinson for 3 years, $48 million. What do you make of this?
I really like the move for Detroit. I mean, with the precarious situation that Malik Beasley has put them in with the gambling news, you need to add another guy in this archetype, and you can't really go wrong, in my opinion, adding a marksman alongside a guy like Cade Cunningham. A quick sidebar real quick. Dude, I was scrolling through TikTok last night, bored before I went to sleep, and I saw a dude ranking his top 10 NBA players, and it was like the worst list I've ever seen in my life.
Duncan Robinson, top 10?
Dude, he had Cade Cunningham at 5 above, above LeBron, above KD, above Steph, above Brunson, above Anthony Edwards, above Donovan Mitchell.
I mean, there's got to be some crazy dudes. It's got to be like above Luka. If you're going all the way up to 5,
no, he didn't.
Above Tatum.
He didn't, and he wasn't ranking injured guys. So Tatum and Halliburton weren't on the list, but he did have Luka above him. But it's just ludicrous to me, and I don't know if this is something that, again, I don't normally pay attention to the online discourse about like where player rankings are. There just still seems to be this
top 5 is not a take you're going to see a lot.
Well, No, obviously, that wasn't really my point here. My point was more that I don't know if there's this massive valley between where Cade actually is and how high he ranks, but it seems like there's this fundamental misattribution for why the Pistons got a lot better last season. And a lot of people, again, and we talked about this all throughout the regular season, but it seems like a lot of people are still attributing it to Cade taking this superhuman superstar leap. And it's like, don't get me wrong, Cade certainly got better over the last year, but the bigger aspect of it was that they added legitimate NBA rotation caliber players to the Pistons roster, and that's why they got better. It wasn't because Cade went from scum of the earth to superstar,
Exactly.
right? So
Cade was very underrated in the 2024 season.
100%.
And then people act like he became a totally different player when he just kind of slightly improved on the margins and his team got a lot
because
better.
we do this team exactly because and KD's not top 10 anymore because the Suns didn't make the playoffs, and it's one of the dumbest things we do in sports discourse. And so I just wanted to get that out there because I don't really know how people feel about Cade, but that made me want to gouge my eyes out. And
this is why your nightly routine should just be watching through all the Nerd Sesh videos. That's what I do every single night. I watch 3-4 hours of Nerd Sesh video. I skip through all the stretches where you're on camera, and I just look at myself and lean back, cup of coffee. It's a beautiful way to end the evening.
I know you don't drink coffee, so that's fake. That's false.
I do only at nighttime when I'm watching myself on TikTok.
Hey, man, you're running the numbers up. That's admirable.
Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't make a cent.
Yeah, all the views are actually Carson at night in his sleeping gown with his candle and his glasses.
You know my nightly routine.
So, basically what I'm saying is, I don't know where people feel about Cade. Cade's a very good player. He's somewhere in this top 25 range. You can't go wrong adding NBA rotation guys around him and floor spacers, and Duncan Robinson is going to do that. One of the best shooters in the league. And, yeah, I'm really excited about his fit alongside Cade. And they've already got, they've got athletes. They've got Ron Holland. They've got Asar Thompson. This is another archetype that they need to add, and Duncan's going to do his job. You know what you're getting, right? It's a sure thing. And if this was like a Davis Bertans kind of contract where they're dropping the $80 million bag on him, maybe I'd have a problem with it. $16 million a year feels appropriate for Duncan. So I like this move for Detroit, and they're not losing ground. You know, Detroit hasn't taken this major leap to me like in Atlanta, like in Orlando. They're in a different tier. But they're standing pat, and they're not getting worse. So I like this move for Detroit.
I think that if you look at the market that's been set around the league, this is a little bit high in terms of annual value for Duncan, just like he's getting paid more than Nickeil Alexander-Walker per year, who just signed that deal. We have seen that mid-market diminish a little bit, and we've seen, I think, some really good value contract team-friendly deals. And Robinson making $16 million a year, that's probably a little bit high. Now, obviously, a big need for this team is that offensive skill and that shooting from their guards and their wings. And Duncan Robinson is one of the best shooters on the planet. He's added some dimensions to his game with his ability to run a little bit of pick and roll for you, make some of those basic passing reads, stuff that earlier in his career he couldn't do. And then he's had a resurgence really over the last 2 years because he's added some of that. He's got good feel. I like Duncan Robinson. But the thing is, like, everything that Detroit is doing right now is only to replace the offense and the shooting that they're losing with Malik Beasley leaving, obviously, because of the gambling investigation and just not being certain of his status as an NBA player right now. Tim Hardaway Jr. leaving, Dennis Schroder leaving. So them paying LeVert and Robinson a combined $31 million a year, like, it's okay. You had to address those needs, but it's not great, and I can't really view it as an improvement for a team that I think a lot of people were optimistic would actively improve this offseason. As of right now, I think they've actually lost a little bit of talent, and they're really going to be relying on that internal improvement to make any sort of substantial leap.
I think Jaden Ivey could be that guy.
He could. And I think that that's what they're counting on. And they're counting on Cade getting a little bit better. And they're counting on Duran and Asar. And, like, that's fine when you're a young team. I just would set reasonable expectations for Detroit next year and say they're probably not really going to be that much better than they were this year, would be my current outlook for them.
I think they'll be a little better.
I think a little better.
Yeah, I mean,
a couple wins better. Marginal improvement.
and I think going to be more competitive in the playoffs. I think if Ivy's available, that makes a meaningful difference to me. Yeah, I think the Pistons are going to be better. I will say, I think the biggest loss to me right now is Schroder. It's not well, I mean, Beasley's the biggest
Beasley's
loss.
Beasley's a big loss because I would way rather pay Beasley than Duncan Robinson. Maybe not way rather, but I would prefer it.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I was saying I think Beasley's the biggest loss, but I mean, that guy's not even going to be in the league next year. And I mean, I feel like his archetype is easier to address than it is like I guess that's what I meant. I think Schroeder's archetype is the hardest to find, an actual ball handling, downhill kind of guard who can relieve that pressure off of Cade. Like LeVert, I think, is more skilled than Hardaway or Beasley, like off the dribble in terms of self-creation. I think Robinson is in that exact same archetype as both those guys. He may not be as good, or I might not prefer him to a Malik Beasley, but he's in that same archetype. I think Schroeder is the hardest guy to replace in terms of what he brings in his unique value.
And that's where you're going to need Ivy, obviously, to be consistently available as a ball handler, and they're going to stagger some of those Cade Ivy minutes for sure. Schroeder's an interesting player because, like, he had his fair share of ups and downs, and he had a really rough stretch of the regular season, basically his entire time with the Warriors and Pistons.
Nasty. That was nasty.
Really struggled. Crazy because he was off to a red-hot start with the Nets, like putting up crazy good numbers, shooting the ball really well, then struggled for more than half of the regular season, and then was really good in that playoff series, knocked down some big shots, provided some clutch offense, provided some really essential ball handling after Cade. They needed anybody to step up, and also like gave you some really good defensive minutes. So you don't know exactly what you're going to get out of him night after night, but I think that he did play a valuable role for them, and his absence will be felt for the Pistons. Speaking of Dennis Schroeder, he signs for 3 years, $45 million with your Sacramento Kings, Logan. How do you feel about that?
You kind of took the words out of my mouth with what you were just saying about him, Carson. I mean, it kind of depends on what you're going to get. Like, Schroeder's been consistently inconsistent. The one thing I will say, the Kings have needed point guard play. I'm glad that they're addressing it. You know, they were running high-volume Malik Monk, point guards. God, the Kings are such a weird basketball team, man.
You don't like Point Malik offensively?
No, it's sexual. It's beautiful. It's fun. The Kings are fun. If you want, like, dude, the Kings would be the toughest damn pickup team ever. All those buckets, all that speed, all that athleticism. If you were watching them on the playground, you'd go, damn, this is the Harlem Globetrotters. Levine and DeRozan, nasty. Sabonis banging dudes on the block, knocking dudes around, grabbing every board, setting hard screens. Like, if they were a playground team, they'd be freaking sick. Unfortunately,
yeah,
they're not. And they're clunky, and it's weird, and it's funky, and I miss Tyrese Halliburton. Yeah. Schroeder's a good basketball player. I think this is appropriate value. I think 15 M's a year is about right for a guy like Schroeder. If they want to move off of him, I think it's a very movable contract. It addresses a need for Sacramento. Like I said, they have an actual point guard, and I trust Schroeder as a point of attack defender. Not a great shooter. That's not what they're going to ask him to do. They're going to ask him to run pick and roll, find open guys. So I like the move. It's just like the Kings are the most play-in team of all time. Yeah, all time.
So do you think that Schroeder's going to start? Is that what you're saying?
I would probably put Malik back on. It's all clunky because we're the fucking Bulls West, but
don't you think that you need some volume three-point shooting, given that you're going to have DeRozan and Domas in your starting five? But I guess you would also like to have some defense in
Carson,
that group.
you know what I think you're making a mistake of?
What?
You're trying to be logical and rationalize Kings roster decisions and their current situation. What you got to realize is none of it makes any sense because you're just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Good point. Be that as it may, I do think that Malik is better than Schroeder. I think that he's certainly a more dynamic offensive talent. And I think he really has taken a leap as a playmaker. I think that he's progressed there over the years and really has good feel with the roll man and can make some creative passes. And his scoring ceiling is really high. Like, yeah, the Kings just have some core obvious limitations. If it is some of the 3-point volume from their best players, if it is obviously like their entire defensive structure, there's some weird stuff going on there. I kind of think that they're still going to start Malik, and then Schroder is going to be that bench ball handler. And in this case, like, that's kind of a lot to pay, but also it seems like the Kings wanted to move off of Malik Monk. Like, that is some of the reporting that I saw, that they wanted to go with Schroder Russ as their point guard duo and move Malik, but they couldn't find a landing spot for him. So it's a weird situation. My overarching take would be, and obviously everything is weird because the bar for the Kings is just like marginal improvement, I guess. They do have such a hard ceiling on this group. If you're looking at what they need to address right now, with Valanciunas out the door, like, is Reynaud going to be their backup big? Like, is he immediately stepping into that role? That's probably a lot to ask of a second-round rookie. They lose Jake LaRavia. I think that their wing depth is looking a little bit shoddy. Like, I probably would have preferred to focus on that wing big depth and then try to find a cheaper option to be that bench ball handler. Like, if they could have gotten Russ for a significantly cheaper deal, I probably would have pursued that over paying Schroder, whatever it may be, twice or 3 times the annual amount. At the end of the day, they're destined to be mid. Dennis Schroder is kind of the epitome of mid, and I say that with no disrespect, just like because of how erratic he is, his inconsistency as a jump shooter. He's just not somebody who you can really bank on to be a super high impact guy night after night, and that's just kind of the vibe with the Kings. I mean, you can't bet on them to be a super good team night after night. You know that they have their core limitations, and that just kind of is what it is. Big deal in Toronto. Jakob Poeltl extended for 4 years, $104 million. What do you make of this?
Yeah, we have reached the head-scratching portion of the podcast. I don't know. What the
Bro
fuck
is
are
disgusted.
What the fuck are the Raptors doing, man?
You really don't like this.
I mean, they're going to be paying a dude 30 M's in 2028 and 2029. Like, I just don't. What is the ceiling of this team, Carson? They get bounced in the second round? They get bounced in the first round?
I don't like the Raptors. Let me be clear about
Yeah,
that.
that's what.
I think they've got a lot of money tied up in a lot of mid. However,
2027, 41 M's for Scotty Barnes, 40 M's for Brandon Ingram, 33 M's for Emmanuel Quickley, 30 M's for R.J. Barrett, 20 M's for Jakob Poeltl, and then, like I said, Poeltl's got 2 more years after that. What are they cooking in there, man?
so here's what I would say. They already put themselves in that spot, and there's a lot of weird fits here, and there's a couple of overpays, and they do have so much money tied up into a core that I really don't think works that well or is that good. But if there's one dude who I would want to pay, I mean, obviously it's a no-brainer for them that they'll pay Scotty. I think it makes sense to pay Poeltl. And I don't think that this is a ridiculous amount. Like, it's a good-sized contract, but if you look at the center market, it's a little bit more than Claxton. It's a little bit less than an Isaiah Hartenstein. It's a little bit less than a Myles Turner. That's the range that it should be in. So yeah, the Raptors are very tied up in this very mid roster, but that's not a Poeltl problem. I think if you consider what he gives you, 15, 10, and 3, 64% true shooting, 2.5 stocks, good hands, good rim protector, great touch, good passing feel, really good rebounder. Like, he's a very good center, and I think he's an appealing trade option down the line if you do choose to put him on the market. I mean, teams have been asking for him seemingly for years, offering firsts, and Toronto hasn't been willing to do it. So maybe they will continue to refuse to move off of him. But regardless, they need a legit center. So he is that for them right now. And if they ever do want to move him, I think they'll be able to do so pretty easily. I think that he is an intriguing asset for other teams. And I think you're better off locking up that asset than you are losing him. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with Poeltl inherently. It's just that it is the island of misfit toys. It is the clunkiest basketball, one of the clunkiest basketball situations today. And to me, it's just like when we're looking to the future, you're just going to have to make some judgment calls. Like, you're not going to be able to keep all these guys around. You're not going to be able to pay them all. I don't know, man. I guess I'll reserve my judgment until we see this team at full force, at full health at the beginning of the regular season, but I just don't think this thing's going to work, man. I don't like the spacing. I don't like the overall defense. I don't like the amount of money that they have allocated to certain. I'm the biggest Emmanuel Quickley guy on the planet. I think he's overpaid.
Yeah.
I think Brandon Ingram is overpaid. I think Scotty Barnes is overpaid. I think RJ and Poeltl are like the most reasonably priced guys, but yeah, I just don't like what the Raptors are cooking, man. They just seem so stuck and so far away.
I don't disagree with any of that, and I'm just going to say one more time, Jakob Poeltl is not the problem there. I think he's reasonably paid. I think he's the easiest guy to move out of all of these. I think he's an intuitive fit in a number of spots, and it's not a super big dollar value that you're taking on. It's not overpriced. So for all those reasons, don't like where Toronto is at, but I'm good with this move for them. We've got one more signing, and then we're going to answer some big picture questions about free agency. Tre Mann re-ups with the Hornets for 3 years, $24 million. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I like this ad for Charlotte to bring him back. He only played 13 games last year because of a herniated disc in his back, so we'll see how he ramps up. I'm always weary just with back injuries because they can be so hard in terms of mobility. Like your back, it correlates with everything in the rest of your body. So I'm kind of interested just to see what Tre looks like physically coming back from an injury like that. Just in terms of the kinetic chain and everything in your body. But I really like Tre Mann as
your neck, your back, your crack, etc.
Type. You get it. I like Tre as a player, though. 3-level scorer. He's got great touch, good floater game, really good three-point shooter. And I think he can do a good job of running this bench unit for Charlotte. So I like it. I think it's a good value add. I think he's going to give you good minutes. And I've always liked Tre. I mean, his archetype, as we've talked about and as the league has talked about, is one of the least valuable in basketball, that smaller scoring guard that can get attacked defensively. But I don't think this is an overpay, and I think Tre is a really, really skilled and talented offensive player. I mean, he always has been since his time at Florida, and I think he's going to provide a valuable role to this team. I think him and LaMelo, when they shared the court over the past 2 years, they had an offensive rating of like 119.8. Don't ask me what the defensive rating was because that was much higher, but he's a good offensive player. I think he's appropriately paid, and I think he's got a role that he can fill in well here for Charlotte.
Yeah, you mentioned only 13 games, but 14, 3-3 on 54% true shooting. I think that he's a pretty dynamic pull-up shooter. He's always had a really nice ability to create those shots for himself from the perimeter, get some nasty shin angles on that step backs, and he's kind of the definition of a tough bucket. That's what he is, and I think that if you look at a role for him, it's a guy who could be an explosive sixth man. Like you said, if you're going to do that with playmaking, low efficiency, defensive issues, well, that's not a super appealing archetype. But now we're talking about paying him $8 million. I think that it's a really good team-friendly deal here when you consider the talent that is there. You're not paying him $15, $18 million. You're paying him $8 million, and I really like that for Charlotte because I do think that Tre Mann does some good stuff out there. Let's get to some of these big picture questions, Logan, because free agency isn't done, but a lot of those players have been swallowed up, and they found new homes now. Who do you view as the biggest losers of free agency so far?
Man, come on, Carson. You know who it is.
Is it the Lakers?
It's the LA Lakers.
Yeah.
I mean, what other answer is there? I can't think of a – I look at free agency in the draft. I just kind of put all this together in terms of the offseason because some other teams I thought about, I was like, all right, maybe we could say Phoenix. But I like what Phoenix did in terms of because I didn't think they got great value back for KD, but they got their big men, right? So I like what they did in the draft, so I wasn't going to write them down. It's to me, the Lakers should be in panic mode right now, full frantic panic mode because they've got Luka Doncic in his prime, and they've got LeBron James on a one-year deal, and he's kind of flirted with the premise of him leaving if the Lakers aren't championship-level contenders. So that to me would say if I'm GM of the Lakers, we got to make some moves. We got to get to moving. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's kind of passed you by. Like you mentioned, a lot of the big fish are off the market. A lot of the little fish are gone too. You got to strike when the iron's hot. And unfortunately, it's ran cold. I don't know. It's like the Lakers are content with standing pat. And that is the complete opposite of where they should be. They lost Dorian Finney-Smith, which was a huge, huge L for them. Like a amazing, amazing role player that fit beautifully alongside LeBron and Luka Doncic, and they haven't done anything. They've literally done nothing. They had a Jake LaRavia. Whoop-de-freaking-do, man. Like, yippee. There are so many holes in this roster. There are so many things they need to address, and I just feel like the Lakers are too comfortable right now, Carson. If it was shopping Austin Reeves, I would do it. If it's I'm exploring all of my options. I am exhausting everything. The only two guys that are off the table right now are Luka and LeBron, and I am firmly building around them, and the Lakers have done absolutely nothing. The only other team I wrote down was Oklahoma City, and the only reason I wrote them down was because I just felt that they hadn't been as aggressive as I would have liked them to be. But guess what? They just won the freaking title, all right? If they don't want to be overly aggressive, they don't have to be. So, like, I couldn't even consider them to be actual losers just in terms of what I wanted them to do and what they have done. There's a big gap. And so I thought about them. But it's definitely the Lakers, and I don't think it's close. I think they are – this is not me picking on a big market. If any team that was in this situation that had a 40-plus-year-old star that is discontent – and one of the best players in the league in their prime, I would feel this way. It's not just me picking on the Lakers. It's how I feel. So I think they're the biggest losers unequivocally of free agency.
That's the right choice. And OKC, I see what you're saying with them not being aggressive and other teams maybe catching up a little bit. But obviously, OKC still does have so much potential for internal development. They did some nice stuff with the team-friendly extensions with Jalen Williams and with AJ Mitchell. Like, at least they're doing some stuff, and they just have way, way, way less pressure on them to be active. The Lakers are sitting on their hands here, and that is ostensibly to have cap in 2027. That's like coming out of their front office that's the reason they're not being aggressive. That's insane to me because not only will LeBron be out of the picture by then.
Bro, just trade LeBron.
No, you might as well at that point because he's not going to stick around for another couple years of you guys trying to build up your cap, obviously. He wants to contend, and he will be out of the picture at that point. But beyond that, there's no guarantee Luka Doncic is going to be back if you don't show an ability to put a legitimately good team around him. He can leave after this year. He's got a player option after this year. So if he's not happy with where things are headed, he can just jump ship. And maybe most importantly, why are you so preoccupied with cap space in an NBA where, like, it is so rare to see a superstar just get signed outright in free agency? Like, that very rarely happens these days.
That guy is Luka Doncic, and he's going to walk out of your doors if you don't do something. Dumbasses.
Point, man. And, like, you could say theoretically, okay, well, maybe if anybody's going to sign a free agency, it's going to be the Lakers. But look at how they've acquired their stars. It's been a trade for Anthony Davis. It's been a trade for Luka Doncic. And I just don't see that realistically. Like, players know that they can force their way out of situations. They know that they can do it. So they are going to sign whatever homegrown contract they can, which is where they can get their absolute max money. And then if they're unhappy in a couple years, they're going to ask out with the trade. Like, you're not just going to stumble upon this glorious free agency market in 2027. Certainly not to the extent where you should deprioritize the next 2 years with 40-year-old LeBron and 26-year-old Luka in the heart of his prime. Like, that's just crazy to me. And the DFS departure was brutal. I thought he was their third most important player because he's just such a good two-way wing who you know is going to do his job at a high level. And Austin Reeves is certainly their third most talented player, but he struggled so much in the playoffs, and he's just not a good fit with Luka. That defensive backcourt is such a disaster. So you lose the one guy who was really good in a role that you desperately need from an already very lean roster. You've done nothing really to address that on the wings. You've done nothing whatsoever to figure out your center situation, which is obviously a disaster and needs to be fully overhauled. Like, you just look around, and despite the fact that they have Luka and LeBron and they have the Lakers cachet, like, this roster is getting lapped by OKC, Denver, Houston, Minnesota, the Mavs, the Clippers, all of those teams have significantly better, more complete basketball teams. The Lakers right now have two guys, and everything around them is just not nearly up to snuff. Like, this team needs to get that legitimate center who they can play playoff minutes. They need to get those athletic defenders on the wings. They need to just entirely improve defensively. I do think that they should move Reeves for a better fit, and instead they're doing none of this. They're not even making improvements on the margins. They're like literally just la-di-da-di-da, see you in 2027. I think it's crazy. I think it's insanity. There's still the possibility that they go out there and they get Ayton, and that's fine, and that would be a good value move, but it's not nearly enough.
I was going to say, that can't be the only thing that you do. That's not the thing that's going to get you there.
Absolutely not. And we knew when this team traded for Luka that the roster was far away, and it was unlikely that they were going to immediately turn themselves into contenders, because that's not the position that they were in when they traded for Luka. That was really a win for them because of the long-term upside. But still, to be this far away and not making any sort of proactive moves to improve, I think it's super disappointing. I think that they are the biggest losers of free agency so far. The only other team who comes to mind to me would be a team that's in a somewhat similar position where they have their superstar, and yeah, they're a good playoff team, but they need to do a lot more to jump into, forget the top tier in the West, the top 4, the top 6 in the West. And that's the Golden State Warriors, who don't have a ton of maneuverability because they have $140 million tied up in Steph and Jimmy and Dre, and you understand that. But I believe they do have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception at their disposal. And you look at some of the guys who are just coming off the market. I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. signs for the minimum to Denver. Like, maybe he just wants to play for a championship. He doesn't think he could do that with the Warriors. Okay, but adding a bench shooter of that caliber would be valuable for them. Luke Kennard was a potential target who I loved for them, and a guy who could bring that elite shooting and a little bit of ball handling that they really need. He goes to Atlanta on a 1-year deal, $11 million. Like, they still have some things that they badly need to address. They need more ball handling. They need more shooting. They need a legitimate big of any kind, and they haven't done anything to address any of those needs, and they still could. I mean, there's rumors about Horford to the Warriors. I would really like that. Maybe could they get in on a Malcolm Brogdon in that bench ball handler role? Perhaps, but the Warriors are just a very frustrating front office to me, and I think that they kind of live in a fantasy land, and I think this is kind of the case for the fan base too, because I live in San Francisco. I'm a Warriors fan. I talk to a lot of Warriors fans. Like, it seems like the plan is always, we're going to get Giannis, and it's like, how? Why? With what assets? Or it's, oh, we're going to turn Kuminga into something really good off a sign and trade, and it's like, well, really, where's the market for Jonathan Kuminga, and where are the teams who have the cap? You know, it's like, well, if the Nets want him, they can sign him outright. Who's going to be paying a significant amount for Jonathan Kuminga and giving you back anything of value? They just seem to be destined right now to be like a decent playoff team, and that's fine. And I will always support the Jimmy move, and I'll even support the Jimmy extension as big as it was, because it took them to a totally different level as a team, and they were going out sad in the Steph era before that, and you can't go out sad with the greatest player in your franchise history. But to not be able to make these moves on the margins, like, it's just very disappointing. It's been a completely stagnant offseason. They've done nothing in the draft, nothing, and they have to do something. I've addressed the needs. I've explained them. That's what the Warriors need to go out there and figure out and improve. And until they do that, I think that they're a loser of free agency.
It's a good shout. I mean, now that you've made the big move, now you got to make the ones on the margins. And, yeah, they haven't done anything either. Really quick, rapid fire. If you were these teams, would you consider an Austin Reeves deal for your center? Utah, we talked about this one before on the show. Kessler.
Yeah, I would consider it. I think that the Jazz are like continuing to make their backcourt a little bit more crowded. And so I don't know if Austin Reeves is as appealing an asset to them, and Walker Kessler is so damn solid, but I think that you at least have a conversation there, and I think that would be great for the Lakers.
Okay, next team, Brooklyn, Nick Claxton.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation you can have. I mean, Claxton's contract is a little bigger, so you'd have to figure out whatever to make that work. But I think that you got to figure out where can he get minutes with Ben Saroff and Traore and Igor Demon, of course, who are going to be the top priorities for the Nets' future. That backcourt's a little crowded too, but I think that Austin Reeves immediately becomes one of their best assets. And the same would be true for the Jazz, by the way. The Jazz would just also be giving up one of their best assets, whereas the Nets would be giving up a guy who's not as well aligned with their timeline. So yeah, I think that could be interesting for sure.
Last one, and I think this makes the most sense for like Reeves stylistically. What about like we talked about one of the guys who they cut, but what about like Portland with a Rob Williams?
I think Reeves is too good an asset.
I think so too, just because Rob can't stay healthy. But
exactly.
If he could, I think it would be mutually beneficial with like both teams' needs.
I think that the Kessler-Claxton range is a good one to look at. Claxton is probably more attainable than Kessler for good reason. But the thing with Austin Reeves is like, yeah, he's really good, but he doesn't fit with Luka. You have him for one more year. And then this like super friendly deal that you got him to agree to, that's up. He's got a player option. He's going to be gone. And I highly doubt that you're going to have the means to pay him. So I just think at this point, get what you can out of him while you can. And if it's a center, then absolutely you should be pursuing that. On the flip side of this, Logan, which team has improved the most this offseason?
So I think that Denver has won the offseason. Denver and Houston would be my big winners of the offseason. Mm-hmm. Houston getting KD, Denver overhauling their bench, flipping MPJ for Cam Johnson. But I think the team that has improved the most this offseason for me has to be the Atlanta Hawks. Again, we talked about this last episode, but from where they were previously in my Eastern Conference standings, which is like a play-in range team, 7-10, 6-10, and maybe they were a little bit higher than that in the higher portion of that range because of Boston getting injured and Indiana getting injured. But that was the range they were in playoffs and last regular season. Now I look at this team as probably top 4 in the East. Like, I just think they've gotten a lot better. I think they have acquired players that help them bring a winning impact. I think the Porzingis swing is one that's really worthwhile considering they gave up no capital whatsoever to go and get him on this one-year rental. You know, looking in the future, who knows what Atlanta is going to look like beyond this season because you're going to have to extend KP if he plays well. But I really like the direction they're headed. I think they have improved the most in this offseason. More so than the other teams. Like, right, Houston was the 2nd seed last year. Elite defense. They've certainly addressed their biggest need. Denver took the champs to 7 games in these playoffs. Atlanta, to me, is the team that has the chance to maybe go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I certainly didn't feel that way about them last season. So, for me, it's Atlanta.
It's got to be either Atlanta or Houston. And the reason that I say that is Houston obviously was already the 2 seed, right? But they have launched into a totally different stratosphere as an actual playoff threat with the addition of Kevin Durant. I also love the DFS pickup for them. I just think that defense is looking even nastier. Their depth is looking even better than it already was. And they have now taken that leap from good, scrappy playoff team to, okay, you can win the title. That's extremely difficult to do, and they've done it. The Hawks have taken that leap from play-in team to legit good 50-win kind of team in the Eastern Conference, which is also very significant and sizable, but it's not as difficult to do, I would say, as the leap that the Rockets have taken. But I think it's either one. I think that the Rockets addressed easily their biggest issue, which was their half-court offense. Not to say that they figured it all out, but now they have a guy who can be an extremely effective number 1 scorer, an offensive option for them, who can bring them up to a solid level in the half-court offensively. And then they're going to be so great defensively, so great in terms of rebounding, so punishing athletically, physically, that they can go out there and beat anybody. That's the kind of leap they had to take. And then for the Hawks, their roster is just looking significantly better. I love KP as a stretch big and mismatch attacker and rim protector for them. I love philosophically what they've done, just putting a bunch of athletes in 2-way wings around Trey, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is the latest in that list. I love them getting another skilled offensive player like they did with Luke Kennard. I even love the move that they make with the Pelicans, where now they're going to have probably a really valuable first-round pick next year. The better pick between the Pelicans and the Bucks. That's going to be sweet for them. I think that they've absolutely nailed this offseason. I think that both teams, they and Houston, have put themselves into a totally different tier than where they were beforehand. The Nuggets, I agree, are huge winners of this offseason, but they haven't taken as dramatic an improvement because I think that they were already significantly closer than Houston to being like an actual threat. They were flawed, but they didn't have to make a core move like adding a Kevin Durant, which the Rockets did, and I'm very, very happy that they did. Okay, we're talking about the Nuggets. We're talking about the Rockets. Those are the two teams that have emerged as the biggest threats in the West, in my opinion, and probably in the league to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, with those improvements that we've seen elsewhere from the competition, would you consider at this point, with free agency largely having seen most of the big players find new homes, do you view OKC as an odds-on title favorite heading into next year?
I don't. I think they're definitely my title favorite. If I had to put a percentage on it, though, I'd probably say more like somewhere between 25 to like 35%. Like, I think they've got a large portion of the pie, but I really like Denver. Denver has the second biggest portion of that pie to me, then Houston, and then a team you didn't mention. I would give Dallas a decent, maybe not a sizable portion, but I'd give them a little bit of the slice too. Like, I couldn't say more than 50%. Like, Denver to me has a real chance, and I'm so excited. Like, I think they played as well as they could have. And I get they had some bad games against OKC, but they did force them to 7. And that was more than I expected from Denver coming into the playoffs. Houston has addressed their biggest need, has gotten even deeper on the wings and into their identity, adding DFS, adding Clint Capella, and they have the internal development for guys to get way better. And then Dallas is just kind of a huge variable and huge question mark. Like, how healthy are AD and Kyrie both going to be? How great is Cooper Flagg going to be coming into this season? How effective is D'Angelo Russell going to be on this team? But I would give them a chance. And then, of course, you have to give some small portion of the pie, I guess, to whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference. But
the Cavs disrespect.
Oh, yeah, Cleveland for sure. I'd put Cleveland behind Houston. So, actually, they have more portion than Dallas for sure. But those 4 teams, I wouldn't sleep on. So, I really like OKC. They are definitely my title favorite for next season, but I couldn't say they're odds on. I think there's too many other great teams that have really closed this gap in a meaningful way.
There's 4 tier 1 title contenders to me, and that's the Thunder, Nuggets, Rockets, and Cavs. I will just continue to beat the Cavs drum. I think lumping them in with the rest of the East is wrong. I think that acting like they're a tier below some of these teams out West is wrong. I think that offense is going to be absolutely insane. I think Mobley can improve further. I think that they will certainly be healthier going forward. I think their depth is still good, and they won 64 games for a reason. You can say what you want about the playoffs, and that's fine. I just think they're significantly more talented than every other team out East. But I do think I slightly prefer just the Rockets being as insane as a two-way team as they're looking right now. That defense, that rebounding, that physicality with KD improving the half-court offense. They have the question of what level Amen and Şengün get to next year, and that's why I am a little bit more confident in the Nuggets, because I don't think that they really have a question like that. I think you know what you're getting out of them more so. And all those teams are real threats to the Thunder. So even as a huge, huge Thunder optimist, I couldn't say odds on either. Like, I can't say that they have a better than 50% chance heading into next year. I would say it's higher than you are. It's probably like 40% for me. And they have opportunities to increase that share of the pie. Like, they can still make a move. Cam Johnson is obviously off the market, but we've talked about, okay, what if they want to go out there and get Trey Murphy as a guy in that elite shooting archetype who can be solid for them defensively, bring a little bit of ball handling, and that would probably increase their margin. I'm not sure that they're going to do that, though. I mean, a lot of the indications from Presti, if you look at how they've approached this last year and change, is we're not going to move off of like meaningful draft capital to go out there and add one of those guys. So then the swing factor internally for them going from the clear title favorite to like an overwhelming title favorite would be probably Chet's development offensively. How can he improve as an outside shooter? Can he rework some of the mechanics? Can he get a little bit more comfortable as a ball handler so that he's more effective there in a playoff environment? What level does he get to offensively? Can he improve a little bit as a passer and decision maker and processor? That could put them over the top. But right now they are my favorite, definitely. Denver and Houston are going to be problems, though. And on paper, I think they're both clearly better than any threat OKC faced in their title path this past year, right? Like Boston was the team we were looking at as the other heavyweight throughout the season, but that matchup didn't materialize. Boston melted down in that Knicks series, and then Tatum got hurt and they were taken out of the picture. OKC's going to have to go through at least one of these teams. They might have to go through both these teams, and it's going to be a tough path in the West no matter what. So I do think they'll be better next year because they're trending upwards, because they're so young. And again, they have opportunities to even improve this roster. But even if they don't, I think they'll be better. I think Shea will be a little better. I think Jada will be a little better. I think Chet could be a lot better. But the competition is going to be a lot better as well. It's going to be really, really fun to see, man. This has been a really fun, eventful offseason. And I'm excited for next NBA season already. But the offseason isn't over yet. So we'll see what happens for the rest of free agency. And we will see you guys very soon. Our next episode, a little bit of trivia for 4th of July. Got some guests coming on to kickstart a summer of trivia with guests over here at Nerd Sesh. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoy that. Hope you guys enjoy your 4th of July holiday and hope that you enjoy the duration of this NBA offseason. If you want more of our content, you can find it all across our YouTube channel, all of our full-length episodes and video essays and breakdowns. You can listen to the podcast across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can also join our Discord if you want. That is linked at the link tree across our social media bios. If anybody messages you there pretending to be us, just ask them to send a picture of our balls, and if they refuse, it is not us. And if it goes the other direction, then I think that you know who it is. That's our Discord. Lots of fun stuff going down over there. So, with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.